Hello everyone, my name is Sharon Bonney and I'm the Executive Director for the Coalition on Adult Basic Education. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to today, the final webinar that we're having called the Managers Mondays, reporting adult education data. So thank you for joining us for this webinar. All participants will receive a certificate for CU verification. This will come to you within 24 hours directly from the Zoom platform. So please give us until 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time tomorrow to receive your certificate. And I just want to remind you all that we do deliver 50+ webinars annually. The Managers Mondays is just one of the many different topics that you can subscribe to. We have topics ranging from workforce education, prison literacy, ABE, numeracy, and many more. So you just want to check the website for more details on that. I did mention that this is the final of our 5 webinars in this series, the Managers Mondays, and we're just delighted that you're here with us today. Everything that we cover in this webinar will be posted and uploaded to the Adult Educators Repository. And I'd like to, tilt my hat to Essential Education, who's the sponsor of the Adult Educators Repository. There's a lot of really wonderful information out there, a lot of resources that you can use for free. This is a free resource for adult educators. On a completely different note, we have the COABE Board of Directors leadership opportunities. So Vice President for Membership, regional representatives for Regions 2, 4, and 6 are open, as well as our President-elect. The President-elect must be a current member of the board and have served or currently serving in the role of an elected position. But you can go to our website for more details on that. The deadline is the 15th of January to submit a nomination or to nominate somebody. We also have in the news today the Teacher of the Year, Administrator of the Year, and Adult Learner of the Year, all $10,000 each for our national level awards. We also have the State Innovator, the Workplace of the Year, and the Advocate of the Year. The State Innovator is where if there's something really exciting taking place at the state level, I would encourage you to submit an application or nomination for that. For Workplace of the Year, if you're working really well with an employer, this is a great way to recognize them at the conference. And then as well, Advocate of the Year. This one is really near and dear to my heart because that is how we were able to move forward the Educate and Elevate National Public Awareness Campaign. That's where we asked people to take action on behalf of literacy. We sent out a number of legislative alerts, and we had 86,000 plus contacts with legislators. So really there should be thousands and thousands of Advocates of the Year that are submitted for this award. And through this Educate and Elevate campaign, we're able to stave off $87 million of funding cuts and add $60 million for the field. And none of that goes to COABE, that all goes directly out to the field. A lot of our adult learners took action. That was sort of the secret to the success, is that with 1.5 million adult learners out there, the more adult learners that we get on board taking action and telling their story, the more powerful that is. So we have an adult learner membership. It's free. There's a number of different benefits, one of which is COABE insurance. What this is they can apply for 2 years of $60,000 worth of insurance, life insurance, for free. So there's information on our website, and I encourage you to check that out. Also, all the teachers, administrators, anybody that's a member of COABE can apply. It's not just adult learners. We will have an adult learner strand at the conference, as well as ambassador training that will take place. The ambassador training will give the adult learners the tools that they need to raise their voice with funders and with legislators and the general public. But it also enables them to really professionalize, and it really gives them the sense of being able to take ownership of their future. We will have, as I said, an ambassador program, but we'll also are going to have an adult learner strand specifically created by and for adult learners. So we encourage you to send your adult learners to the conference on March 31st to April 3rd. Now that conference is so much more. I mean, we have 35 national strands, everything from health literacy, disabilities, leadership, program administration, financial literacy, numeracy, everything you can imagine. If it's taking place in the field of adult ed, we're going to have a strand for it at our national conference, and that's with special thanks to our 36 national level partners that we work closely with. As well, I just wanted to mention that we have our COABE journal. This is a free resource to you as a member. And this Career Pathways edition was super popular. It had more than 11,000 downloads. The goal of this journal really was to serve the needs of the field and to be practitioner friendly. You could get a free copy online. Just go to coabe.org and click on journal. So that was in a very quick nutshell sort of what's going on at COABE. But this particular webinar is made possible with support from our friends at Essential Education. And I'm going to ask Dan Griffith, who's here with us today, if he could say a few words on behalf of Essential Education. But before he does, I just want to say that Essential Ed has been a real friend to adult education and a friend to COABE. They're the reason why this webinar is free of charge to you, our members. So Dan, thank you so much. I'm going to turn this over to you for a few minutes.
Thanks, Sharon. We love working with COABE. Love being able to see what you all are doing in the field. I've worked with a lot of different professional organizations, and you guys do a great job of bringing everybody together and sharing information. I'm going to grab the screen from you for just a minute and just show a couple of things to everybody. So I've tried to align my little 5-minute blurb here with whatever the topic was of the week. And so this week I just wanted to show you a couple of reports that we have in the Essential Education programs that might be beneficial as you think about reporting features and what you're going to hear today about NRS reporting. The first is really my favorite report, and this is looking at our GED Academy program, but it's true in our other programs as well, that we do an alignment in our skill mastery report that allows you to pick an individual student and see exactly what skills that student needs in a very quick and effective manner. So this particular student, Becca Johnson, if I drill into the GED target on quantitative problem solving, I see there are 3 sub-targets here, and I can see which ones she's ready in, almost ready, and not ready in, as well as not started. So this would show me that she hasn't started Q1D yet. But what our instructional design team did then, and I think is unique, is they asked themselves a question, you know, ordering fractions and decimals, including on a number line, is a pretty large objective. There's a number of things that a student has to be able to do in order to do that effectively. And so they broke that down to the sub-skills. So with just one click, I can now see whether a student can compare and order fractions, or if their issue is in converting between the fraction, mixed number, decimal, and percent. And so very quickly you can get to a really granular level of information, student by student. And when you're working individually with students, it's a great tool to be able to have reports at hand that you can run either by student or by class. You could run this by whole class, that will show you what they need and make the most effective use of your time. A second report that's important in the NRS world is the study time report. And so as this loads, it's going to show me where my students are in their study progress and how much time they're spending in that. And of course, I can set this by a particular class or a start or an end date. One of the features that people really like is that you can track both in and out of class time, or look at just in class or just out of class. So if you're using our programs in both distance learning or in the classroom, and when a student leaves, you can really separate that time so that you can claim it separately for distance learning time versus in-class time. And so now I can see each of my students who's doing the studying, where they're doing the studying, whether it be in class or out of class. And that can make it really easy for me to report. I can export all of these into Excel documents, so I can structure it however, and then input it into whatever learning system or reporting system I'm using. One other thing is our student summary report. I'll just show this real quickly. This exports to an Excel spreadsheet, and one of the things that people really like in this is that it lets me look at a particular student. So this is Curtis Banks. He's working in our Computer Essentials course. I can see the particular lessons that he's studying in and how much time he's spending in each lesson, which is very helpful. Sometimes students go through things so quickly, and as a teacher, if you can come back and say, well, Curtis, I saw that you only spent 2 minutes in organization in your life, and that's not enough time for you to effectively integrate that lesson, can be really beneficial. But it also gives you the scale score, or the actual score, raw score, and scale score. And that's really helpful if they're doing something like taking a practice test. You'll see up here this student was taking the math GED practice test 1. And so I can see that what their raw score was and what their scaled score was to give me some idea where that student actually falls. So these are a few of the reports. We have a whole bunch more and a whole bunch of other tools available. If you'd like a demo of any of our programs, I'll put my email address in the chat box right now. And feel free to shoot me an email. I'm glad to get you set up with demos of any of our programs. And we can do webinars to show you through them as well. Thanks again to Sharon and COABE for giving us the opportunity to sponsor this activity and to say a few words about our programs. And thanks to all of you for the incredible work you're doing in the field. It's not many people really know how much goes into being an adult educator, but we do, and we appreciate you a great deal.
Thank you so much, Dan. We appreciate that. So before I introduce our presenter today, I just would like to ask everybody that's on to put their name and where they're joining us from in the chat box. And I also would like to encourage you that when I do introduce our presenter, that you would put any questions for her in the Q&A and not in the chat box. It just makes it easier for her to be able to get to them. So you'll just put your name and where you're coming in from on the chat box, and you put any questions in the Q&A. So I'm delighted to present to you today Jenny Schlukebier. Jenny Schlukebier has over 16 years of experience in adult basic education accountability and reporting. She has worked for the Minnesota Literacy Council, the St. Paul Literacy Consortium, and the St. Paul Public Schools ABE program, managing and coordinating accountability, data management, and reporting. Since 2015, she has worked at Urban Planet, the developer of Minnesota's ABE data system. She coordinated the development of and the transition to the upgraded system and the continued support and updates required for NRS and WIOA reporting. So we're really delighted to introduce you to Jenny, who is our presenter today. Jenny?
Hello, let me share my screen here. Okay. Thanks for that introduction, Sharon. It's great to be here. Can everyone hear me? I'm going to make sure I have my chat window open as well.
We can hear you, Jen, yes.
Okay, great. So thanks again for inviting me. Thanks for the introduction, Sharon, and thank you to Essential Education for supporting these Monday meetings. This is really a fun way to get information out to the field. I'm going to talk today about reporting adult education data. It's a pretty exciting topic. And I'm going to cover National Reporting System information and WIOA. It's kind of a big topic, actually, but we're going to get through as much as we can here. Again, my name is Jenny Schlukebier, and as Sharon said, I've worked in the ABE field at the programmatic side. Through St. Paul Public Schools, I was responsible for reporting and accountability, overseeing students, registration, etc. And also St. Paul Community Literacy Consortium, which was a partnership of the St. Paul schools and nonprofits in St. Paul providing ABE to the community of St. Paul. I'm currently working with Urban Planet, as Sharon said, and we have built the ABE data system in Minnesota. We work very closely with Department of Ed to make sure that we're in compliance. And so I bring with me the experience of working with the programs at a program and then now working on the data side of things. So I think that is a little bit of a unique perspective. I was hoping people would also introduce themselves. I'm going to look down here at my third bullet point. I was curious if I see a lot of intros coming through, which is great, and I definitely won't be able to see them all, but it's good to see that we've got folks from all over the country. I'm a little curious how long people have been in ABE, only because what I'll be talking about a little bit today is WIOA, which is pretty new, and I'm kind of curious how long, if a lot of the folks here today have been here pre-WIOA, or if folks are new under just WIOA regulations. I see a lot of people have been around a long time. That's excellent. I thought it would be important for me to describe ABE in Minnesota a little bit too. I know all states, oh, we got somebody who's been here 3 months. Welcome to ABE. In Minnesota, we are apparently the 9th largest in numbers of ABE students in the country. at about 35,000 participants in the last program year, 2017-18. We are a state that gets significant state funding, and our ABE funding streams through the K-12 system, not the workforce or post-secondary. And I know the states all do have different systems, but that's where we are in Minnesota. And as I've alluded to before, we have our own homegrown data system. And I thought that might be, some of that influences how we approach reporting and how we run as an ABE program in Minnesota. Great, thanks for all the intros, everyone. And I just wanted to remind you, if you do have questions throughout the session, that there's that other box for Q&A, and then those won't get buried between all the introductions, and hopefully we can get to those. I'm hoping to get to those at the end, so we'll see how we go through the flow of today. So the agenda for today, I'm hoping to strike a balance, kind of an overview of NRS and reporting, and a little bit of some details on specific reports, those ones that are in particular about the outcomes and the ones that have changed quite a bit over WIOA. So I'm hoping to strike that balance through today's agenda. I'll talk briefly just about what the National Reporting System is, the official definition. I'm going to point out some resources. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history to give us some context, and then NRS reporting requirements, how you can find them, what they are, and some of the changes in reporting, which are due to WIOA in the last few years. Briefly talk about negotiated targets, and I hope to have some time for Q&A at the end. Now, as you note, I am from Minnesota. I'm not from OCTE or any of the federal agencies responsible for creating the reporting. So I hope I can answer questions from my vantage point, and maybe other folks in the field can answer questions as well. And I do hope that if you have questions that I can't answer at the moment, I can point you in the right direction of where to get those questions answered. The National Reporting System, otherwise known as NRS, I just copied and pasted this definition right from the NRS website, which I'm going to point out in a moment. The National Reporting System is the accountability system for adult education programs. It was authorized under the WIOA Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, and prior to that under WIA. And it includes the WIOA primary indicators of performance. So what this does is it measures and describes the adult education students, their program participation. It goes into depth about methodologies for collecting the information and program reporting. So it's our reporting system for adult education. We're all very familiar with it, I'm pretty sure. As I said, I wanted to point out some resources. One place where you can find a wealth of information about National Reporting System and all the reporting tables is at the nrsweb.org website, and that's located, it's a very simple address, nrsweb.org. And that is provided to us by the NRS Support Project, which is funded by the U.S. Department of Ed, Division of Adult Education and Literacy, and the Office of Career Technical Adult Education, OCTE. And this is conducted, it's contracted out to an organization called American Institute for Research. So that's a lot of acronyms floating around, but I think it's easiest to think of it as the support group for NRS. And again, you can find the nrsweb.org is the site where they have all kinds of information. And what I'm going to point to a lot today is the NRS Technical Assistance Guide. And that is where all the information is laid out for our reporting. There's definitions, there's the paper versions of all the reports. So I will refer to that quite a bit today. But also on this website, you'll find that they provide webinars, face-to-face trainings, and other tools. And this is what the website looks like right here. As I mentioned, the NRS Technical Assistance Guide can be found at this website. And it comes in two forms, actually. So there's the PDF that you can download, and it looks like this. The front cover looks like this, and it's 200 some pages. So yes, the NRS has a lot of detailed information in it. And I'm going to try to highlight some of the things that, that are the most important to focus on. But they also recently put out an interactive guide that I just noticed that is is where you can click on different sections of the interactive guide, and it'll bring you to the different areas of the technical assistance guide. It's pretty nice way of laying out the information. So there's two ways of getting all the technical assistance guide from the NRS website. Another area, I guess technically this isn't officially a resource, but I find this to be a pretty useful website to go to for information, and that is actually the Octave National Reporting System website. And if you notice, it has one of those long and crazy URLs. But if you actually Google Octave National Reporting System, it will bring you there to, I think it appeared as the first link when I Googled it. And what you're going to see when you first get there is actually this login screen. And this, if you are the state director of ABE in your state, you probably have an email and password, you log in, and this is where those folks actually go in and submit their annual reports. But if you're just a member of the public or a program manager or an ABE teacher, you can also go here and you can click on the green where it says the public, go here, and then you can see view only reports. And after you click through another screen that says statistics, after that you will see this screen, and this shows all the NRS reports. And you can see there's a little drop down, so you can select any of the states, you can select any of the years, and any of the tables. So you can look at your own state's results on their reports for the last, it's like quite a number of years, 12 years or so. And you can look at other states. So you can compare your own state to other states. And what I like about it also is just a nice quick glance at all the reports that are required. And again, that's called the Octave National Reporting System. Okay, so like I said, I'll be referring back to those, particularly the Technical Assistance Guide. Now I'm going to launch into a little bit of the NRS history. So I wanted to talk about this just to give some context for the reporting, where it came from and how it's changed over the years. So if you go back all the way to the 1990s, that was an era in federal government when accountability became a big issue. So programs, federal governments had to start to demonstrate their importance and to show their outcomes. And that was kind of a little bit new. So began the development of adult ed having to create their reporting system. So the late 1990s, 1997, 1998, they started to develop the NRS system. And in fact, in 1998, as the Workforce Investment Act was passed, and that required the accountability. So then it was the late 1999, 2000, when NRS was implemented and the guidelines were drafted. And it was that summer, July 2000, when NRS formally went into effect, and the guidelines were available in the spring. And I believe it was that fall when the first year reports were actually submitted by states. And you can see that it was after the NRS Act went into effect that training and support and local implementation really started to kick into gear the next couple of years. And then over the course of the next 10 plus years, we in the ABE field were reporting pretty much these similar NRS tables for about 10 years. And there were changes here and there, some tweaks, some workforce development classes that were reported and not reported, things like that. But it kind of remained in place under the WIOA system for over 10 years. Now the focus of the reporting under the WIOA system was twofold. There's demographics and participation information. So your typical demographics such as the age, ethnicity, education level of your students, the employment status, hours participation, and their programming, whether they're ASL, ABE, or ASC. And then outcomes. So the outcomes under WIOA consisted of level gains, which we're all familiar with on the table 4, and that was based entirely on pre and post tests. And then follow-up goals. So the other outcome, the follow-up goals were primarily after students exited, whether they gained employment, whether they gained a secondary credential such as adult diploma or exams such as GED or HiSET, and then entered post-secondary and training. So those all counted as follow-up goals, and those are the main tables that were reported every year. And we reported follow-up goals also for subsets of students like those in corrections and things. But the thrust of the reporting was these two items. And that, like I said, continued for about 10 years. Then the last couple of years was when WIOA finally went under transition and a new legislation came, and in 2014, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act was signed, WIOA, as we are all familiar with it. That was signed into law to bring about increased coordination and partnership between a variety of federal programs. So until then, ABE, an adult education, we reported our results, and we were kind of in our own little silo. But now under WIOA, it was required that we now partner with these other titles of federally funded programs. So the other titles are Title I, which is Adult Dislocated Worker and the Youth Formula programs. That's administered by Department of Labor. Title II, which is us, Adult Education, and we're administered by Department of Ed. Title III, which is the Wagner-Peiser Act, I think I pronounced that correctly, which is Employment Services, also by Department of Labor. And Title IV, which is Rehabilitation Act, also administered by Department of Ed. So like I said prior, we were reporting just adult education, and now we are in partnership and coordination with the other titles. And that's the important feature of WIOA. And it also, WIOA requires partnership in programming as well. What we're focusing on today is our reporting. So now that we're in the era of WIOA, it took a few years to get us going, so we have official reporting requirements. So in 2015, the NRS was revised. So we no longer had the tables under WIOA, and we now have a few additional tables to our NRS tables, and we have what are called the joint accountability requirements, where we as adult ed roll up our information with our WIOA partners. So we are a couple years in. So the program year 2016-2017 was the first year of reporting under this new WIOA system. And that was, all those reports were turned in fall of 2017. And then this past fall, just a couple months ago, was the second year. And there were some adjustments to those reports. Changes to those reports compared to WIOA, and I'll talk through those. And now we're in the third year. So this year, the 2018-19 program year, is the third year of reporting to the WIOA-based system. And there's a few more changes. So adjustments and changes continue with the reporting requirements. And I'm going to touch on a number of those today. First, I want to give an overview of those changes, just sort of the general categories of what the changes are, before I launch into some of the detailed reports that are different. So as I mentioned, under WIOA, there's the demographics and participation information, which under WIOA was primarily, your typical demographic information. And now with WIOA, they've added a category called barriers to employment. So students their information is disaggregated by if they fit into certain categories that they are considered barriers to employment. And those are things such as low income, ex-offenders, long-term unemployment, and disability, et cetera. Also, under WIOA, we reported students based on whether they are ESL, ABE, or ASE, and we now also subset out students who are integrated education and training, IET students, and integrated English, literacy, and civics education students. So we're reporting out a couple more different programmatic areas. And the outcomes, this is where there's more significant change. So the outcomes are also referred to as the WIOA primary indicators. So under WIOA, formerly on Table 4, we would report level gains, and we now are required to report measurable skill gains, referred to as MSGs. And in the past, the level gains were only counting pre and post-test level gains, but now measurable skill gains offers a few other ways that you can show students are making gains. And I will get into detail on those in the next couple slides. So that is Table 4. And then on Table 5 are the core follow-up goals. And I noticed throughout the the tech manual and other information about NRS and WIOA, they're also referred to as outcome achievements and post-exit indicators. So I'm kind of using all of those phrases for the core follow-up goals. That's what we've traditionally called them in ABE. There's some changes in these follow-up goals as well. The employment indicators are now looking to see if students are employed second and fourth quarter after they've exited. And it also looks for median income of students who've exited our ABE programs. We are, the diploma and equivalent measure now is looking to see if the student has gained employment or is in post-secondary within a year of getting their diploma or equivalent in order for it to count on the core follow-up table. And again, I'll show this table, which is table 5, and we'll talk more about that. And finally, the post-secondary credential requires co-enrollment. So these are some of the major, an overview of the changes that have occurred with our reporting now that we are under WIOA. And finally, there's a few other things that have changed with our reporting. Most notably, I think, if you're on the reporting side of things, this is something new that's that was kind of tricky to wrap your head around at first, and that is called the periods of participation, otherwise known as POPs. And to put it simply, that is if you have a student who is in your program and then they exit and they're gone for 90 days or more, and then they come back to your program and they enroll again and they have another 12 or more hours, then they actually have 2 periods of participation or 2 POPs. So you might have one student who you report in 2 POPs on the reporting tables. And when we first started learning about this as a data person, it took us a while to figure out how can we count that? Does that make sense? And it turns out, actually, not that many students have more than 1 POP. I was a little bit surprised because we know our students come and go. But I think the fact that they're gone for 90 days and then come back is the definition of a POP. It's surprisingly low number of students. I don't know if other folks have found that to be the case in their states, but I looked at the national numbers as well as Minnesota, and it's pretty low. And also the program exit is officially defined as students who have 90 days with no service and no scheduled service coming up. And then some timelines for reporting. The follow-up information have changed under WIOA. So that's just a little overview of the changes, and let's look at the specific reports. So once again, I'm pointing out the technical assistance guide, because in that you will find all the reports, and they are listed, these cute charts that we're all familiar with for reporting every year. Now, this technical assistance guide was published last December, it looks like, and they have a whole set of reports that were reflective of what we just turned in for reporting year 17-18. And then they have a whole nother set of reports in there, which are the ones for our upcoming program year, 18-19. And there are some changes to those. So I'm going to lay out and talk through some of those changes. Okay, so this screen, I know it just sort of looks like a wall of words, but I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. As you note in the technical assistance guide, you will have pages and pages and pages to look at all these tables. But I wanted to just have one screen where I could list them all. And so we can go through and see what's changed over the years. And then after this, I'll dig deeper into some of the details of the changes. So these were the reports that we turned in 16-17 and 17-18. If you note, the NRS reports are numbered, tables 1 through 14. And then underneath the line here I drew are 2 other reports, and those are the joint statewide performance reports. And those are the ones that are required now that we're in WIOA, and all our partners also complete. So let's go through the first NRS tables. And I want to point out that I've highlighted in purple items that have changed about these tables from WIOA until now that we're in from WIA now that we're in WIOA. So the first 3 tables are basically demographic tables, so I won't spend much time on those. They're pretty straightforward. They count up your participants by their educational functioning level, ethnicity, sex, gender, age, And then table 3 is participant programs by type, so program type, ABE, ESL, ASE, and age. And now that we're in WIOA, there's also subsetted out the IET and IELC. The civics students are subsetted on that table. So that's a change from WIA to now WIOA. Table 4 is where we see a lot of changes. And this is due to the fact that we're now reporting measurable skill gains and due to the periods of participation. So I do have, after this slide, we're going to delve more into MSGs and periods of participation. Tables 4B and 4C are like they were in the past, where they are subsets of 4, basically. We're looking at level gains for just the post-tested students, and 4C is gains for distance education students. The table 5 is similar to our core follow-up in WIA, and now has some changes of the employment and secondary credential indicators, and that's another table that I'm going to go to in more depth. The rest of the tables are kind of subset tables of 5 in many ways. So there's a 5A, which shows those same follow-up indicators, but it's for students who are in distance ed. Table 6 is actually more of a demographics table, and that's counting up your students based on their employment status, their education level, background, that kind of thing. Those are still very similar to before. 7 is the adult education personnel, so it's your staffing table. Table 8 is an optional table, and that's the outcomes, similar to what's on table 5, but it's for your family literacy students. Table 9 has been an optional table in the past on secondary outcomes. Table 10 is similar to 5, so it's your outcomes and your MSGs for students who are in correction facilities. And table 14 is a grantee and funding source table. I'm not going to go into that today. So those, again, are the NRS. So these strictly deal with your adult education program. And then the final 2 that are listed here are for the joint statewide performance reports. Again, your ABE program rolls up your information from these top 14 tables and reports those on here. Most information that's reported on here comes directly from table 4, the MSG table, and table 5, the follow-up outcome table. And I'll talk about those in a moment. So those are the reports we completed the last 2 years, which were the first years under WIOA. We are now in the 3rd year under WIOA, and there's a few more changes. Okay, so if you go back to that technical assistance guide, you're going to find that whole other set of reports that include these new reports. And for some of us, this is, we're in the middle of the year, but we're still kind of figuring out how we're going to work with these new reports. So there's a table 2A. This is pretty straightforward, but it's definitely something new. They're asking us to report the number of what they are calling reportable individuals. So it's just demographics, age, ethnicity, and sex. But this is for students with fewer than 12 hours. So we've always reported students 12 or more hours because those are considered participants. But this table, we're reporting for informational purposes, I guess, students who have less than 12 hours. There were a few more changes added to the table 4 this upcoming year. Some students you can exclude from that report. And then they split out some of the MSGs from each other, so you can just kind of see which way they earn their MSG. Table 4A is a new table, which also shows educational functioning level gains, and it splits out the types of level gain, so whether they got it on reading or math, and then the other MSGs. We'll go into that. Table 9 is another outcome table, similar to table 5, but this is for students with English literacy civics, your civics students. And finally, table 11, this is a brand new table. And this is it's similar to table 5 because it counts the outcome results as well as MSGs for students who are in integrated education training. And I have a couple stars here because it also includes a few additional MSGs. We'll get into that. Okay, so here's the table 4, and I've highlighted things that have changed over the course of the years. So in purple are things that were changed due to WIOA our first couple years. So as I mentioned, instead of only covering level gains by tests, we have a new category called Educational Functioning Level Gain, and you can show students in this column, if they've made a gain from a pre or post test. And there's two other ways, and I'll get to that on the next slide. And you can also show gains by students who attained a secondary school diploma, which is in this column here. So there's a couple different ways now to show measurable skill gains. And we also, this is where you record POPs, so the periods of participation. So you may have one student you report on this, in this section here, but if they exited for 90 days and then they came back, then you will count them twice here. And then their results, they can get a POP, they can get a gain in both POPs, or they might have a gain in neither POP, or they might have a gain in one POP. So it does affect your overall percentages of gains. And then what I highlighted in orange here are the changes that are for this upcoming year. So there is a column now where you can exclude students based on a few criteria. And then they split out the, in the previous year's report, the level gains were lumped together, but here they split out the diploma gain versus the educational functioning level gain. Let's dive into those educational functioning level gains. Okay, so the measurable skill gain is now what the table is referred to, rather than just level gain. And as you see, there are two indicators. I do want to point out that this graphic comes from the Technical Assistance Guide on page 4. So the measurable skill gain can be determined in two ways, using either the educational functioning level gain, as you remember that one column on the table 4, or there's another column for counting if they attained a secondary school diploma. But the interesting thing about educational functioning level, there's 3 ways to show that they've made a gain. The traditional pre-post test, or you can show that if they've earned enough Carnegie units to move from ABE 5 to ABE 6, or if they've exited ABE and enrolled in post-secondary, all within the same program year. Those 3 items are ways that you can show an educational functioning level gain, which is one of your MSGs. And the other MSG is from attainment of a secondary school diploma. Okay, so there now basically are 4 ways of showing an MSG, if you think about it that way, because there's 3 of these which all are part of educational functioning level gain. And this is how we in ABE, because this is our NRS, show level gains. I wanted to also highlight this graphic because you see this often in the Technical Assistance Guide and other support documentation that we get. And this is showing MSGs that other of our WIOA partners are able to report. So the ones highlighted in the dark color here are ours that we as NRS programs, as ABE programs can report using our NRS. Secondary diploma equivalent, which is either adult diploma or GED or HiSET, whichever exam you use in your state. And the educational functioning level gain, which I just mentioned, can be found 3 ways: pre-post test, completion of Carnegie units, and exit and entry into post-secondary education. But there are 3 other ways, other MSGs, that your other WIOA partners are able to report, and that's post-secondary transcript, secondary or post-secondary transcript, progress toward milestones, and passing technical or occupational knowledge-based exams. If you note on the footer here, this comes from our Technical Assistance Guide, this graphic, and it says that Title II, that's us, we cannot use these 3, post-secondary, progress toward milestone, and passing technical occupational skills exam. But as I'll point out in a moment, these do appear on that new Table 11 for our IET students. And this is a new way of being able to show some gains for a certain subset of our students for information gathering purposes. I'm going to just quickly go through the exclusions. As you notice, there's a new column for excluding. You can exclude students from your follow-up tables and the Table 4 if they meet one of these criteria. So students who are incarcerated, this group actually you still have to report on your MSG table. That's the first bullet. The second bullet are participants who are in the hospital, they're receiving medical treatment, they're excluded, students who are deceased, and students who are on active duty. So you can find that information in the technical manual, but I didn't want to slip over that without mentioning those 4 exclusion areas. As I mentioned, the table 4A is a brand new table, and this is where you are going to be able to list out your level gains by their subcategory. So if a student makes a pre and post test gain using literacy, you separate that out from math. So math goes here. If they get the Carnegie unit, and that's how they show their gain, that goes here. And if they transition to post-secondary and exit ABE in the same year, that goes here. So 4A is a new interesting table where you're pulling apart your educational function level gain results. So now I wanted to talk about the follow-up indicators and how those are different. And these appear again on table 5. So these are other main outcomes that will be rolled up and reported with your WIOA partners. So there's a few employment measures, as we mentioned before. So for the most part, I think most states do a data match with some of their employment partners in WIOA. And I know some states actually still do survey as well. But what you're going to do is you're going to match students who've exited your program on their second quarter after exit to see if they're employed, their fourth quarter after exit to see if they've employed, their median earnings, and that is tracked on their second quarter after exiting your program. So the employment measures take place second and fourth quarter after they've exited your program. The other indicator on the outcome table 5 are credential attainment indicators. Now, there is a credential attainment of getting your secondary school diploma or its equivalent, so the exams such as GED or HiSET. Now, this only can be reported on table 5 if the student gets their secondary school diploma or its recognized equivalent and is employed or entered into post-secondary education with 1 year of exit. So it's no longer just about that they got that credential, but that they now are also employed and entered into post-secondary. So that's on table 5. But just a reminder, you do get to count them on table 4 as receiving an MSG. And then the attainment of post-secondary credential, you can report that if they receive that while they're enrolled, or within 1 year of exit. And this is what the table 5 looks like. And now under WIOA, we also have the periods of participation columns. So each of those items, the employment results are listed here, the credentials, the number of participants, and you're only counting those who exited, whether they achieved the outcome, the percentage, and then you're counting the same numbers again based on how many POPs. Again, that's periods of participation. I'm going to talk briefly about the table 11 that I mentioned earlier. This is new this year. And this is outcomes for students who are in integrated and education and training programs, IET. And as I mentioned, it's similar to the other table 5. And you do list MSGs. So the MSGs that we mentioned on table 4. So the achievement of at least one educational function level. If you recall, you can get that 3 ways. There's pre-post tests, there's Carnegie unit, and there's exiting and enter post-secondary. The MSG of attaining a secondary school diploma. So both those are listed here. But then you see those other 3 MSGs that I pointed out on that graphic that shows MSGs that all of the other WIOA programs are reporting. These can be reported for your IET students on this table 11. And then underneath that, there's the typical ones from table 5, the employment outcomes and the credential outcomes. I wanted to highlight this because this is new for all of us. And again, it's just for the integrated education training program students. This number, as far as I know, does not get rolled up into the WIOA reporting that you do with your partners. But according to what I've heard, that this is an informational gathering. Octave seems to be interested in learning what kind of results they're going to find from IET students. But I actually don't know much more than that. I don't know if other folks do. If you look in the technical assistance guide at that table 11, the page after does have some definitions for what those other MSGs are. So if you're pursuing that, and in Minnesota we are looking into tracking some credentials and things like that that might be able to be used on this table 11. I'm not sure where other states stand on that at this point. If folks want to chime in, I'd be interested to hear. So next I'm going to talk quickly about the joint statewide performance report. And these are the ones that if you're a program person, if you're out in the field and you're managing your program, you may never see these joint statewide performance reports. But you should know that your NRS info does get rolled up and then reported to the state with your other WIOA partners. So with those other titles that were mentioned earlier. And I kind of laugh every time I see this because it's tiny. And when I look at the technical assistance guide and I get to this report, I always have to pull out my reading glasses, but it really is this small. So I could probably get a better graphic, but what you're reporting, what your state director most likely is reporting on this is the Table 4 and Table 5 results. And your other WIOA partners, if you can kind of read the other titles, they're all listed up here. So each one of them has their own report. They're checking off which title they are, and they're reporting. And what they're reporting are the outcomes on Table 5 and the total sum of the MSGs from Table 4. Okay, so on the first section of this report, they're going to take all your students, your adult ed students, reporting the number of students, participants, and then using the POPs, the POP number, reporting their employment second quarter after exit, employment fourth quarter after exit, median earnings, their credential rate from the Table 5, and then the MSG. So all the MSG options that we talked about earlier are lumped together on the MSG section here. Okay, and then also on this report, they do disaggregate. So your ABE results from your state are also disaggregated by the demographic groups. So gender, and then you're reporting employment for second quarter after exit, fourth quarter after exit, median income, credential attainment, and MSGs, broken down by the different demographic groups. And so I know you can't read this, I'm sure, but it's the gender, then age groupings, and ethnicity groupings. And then also by the employment barriers. If you remember, we discussed that new category that you ask your students, and there's several employment barriers such as migrant workers, corrections, low income. Those are also disaggregated out here and reported those same outcomes, the employment outcomes, the credential outcome, and the MSG outcomes. And finally, there's one other joint statewide performance report which focuses strictly on measurable skill gains. And here, again, the different titles turn in their report. And so the adult ed students, you will be taking the total sum from your Table 4, not broken down by your ABE and ESL levels, but just the total, and reporting the measurable skill gains. And they do split it out between the educational function level and the secondary school diploma attainment. And as you'll notice on this page are the 3 other MSGs that at this point are being reported by the other partners in WIOA, but we're starting to see that they are asking a adult education program. So for some preliminary results on that, which would be a nice way to show results for our students as well. But right now we're only putting those on the Table 11. And then I just wanted to close with just a brief comment on negotiated targets. We have lots of reports that we turn in, but at this current time, the Table 4, that lists out all our ABE and ESL levels and their MSGs, that's what we negotiate. We in adult ed negotiate our target goals with OCTAE members. But the other partners in WIOA all have targets that they need to reach, I assume. I focus only on adult ed, so I stick to what I know. But the adult education targets, as I mentioned, are set for the MSGs for each of the ABE levels and each of the ESL levels, and for them the subcategories of all your ABE students lumped together and all your ESL students lumped together. But if you do notice, although you have set goals for each of those categories for NRS, when it comes to WIOA, we do roll up that into the entire overall total, and that's what's reported on those joint tables that we ended with there. And as you're probably aware, those targets are negotiated every year. And that's negotiated by your state staff with the OCTAE staff. And those are based on previous year results and then pushing everybody forward, so continuous improvement. And I also understand that eventually there'll be targets for the post-exit indicators. So those are the employment indicators and the credential indicators that are on Table 5. And that since we're only been under WIOA for a couple of years and the results are just coming in now for those goals that have a whole year lag to show whether a student entered employment or post-secondary. So those results are just starting to be reported, and it's based on those reports, I understand, that most likely the targets for those categories will be set. Okay, so that was a quick overview with a few deep dives into a few tables of the NRS reports and the WIOA reports. And I think we might have a couple minutes, I'm not sure, we only have a couple minutes left for any questions. And I hope, like I said, I hope I can answer them. I want to, I come from the field, so I'm like you. And if you do have questions that I feel I can't reply, I don't have the answer to, I'd be happy to try to dig it up or point you in the right direction. Somebody asked if EFL levels are remaining the same for the new TABE and 11-12 tests. I'm not sure. They have a whole new set of scores, and those scores correlate differently to the levels, but they still have levels 1 through 6. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. I do know you can't use a 9-10 as a pretest and 11-12 as a post-test. So you kind of have to restart from scratch with your students. Okay, let's look through questions. Post-secondary requires co-enrollment. Co-enrollment with whom? We only requires co-enrollment. Okay, so I'll have to get more information about the co-enrollment question, Judy. The subsets of IET, Melissa asked a question. And if you look at, I wonder if I switch my screen, can you see my,
we can see it, yes.
See my, okay. I'm gonna see if I can scroll through here to the table 3. Somebody asked about the integrated and education training program. So now on table 3, you report your students as adult basic ed, adult secondary ed, and English, but you also subset out students who are integrated. So you don't count them separately, you count them kind of as a subset of the other categories. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, Melissa. And if it doesn't, Melissa, you can contact me. I put my email, jenny@urbanplanet.com, and I'll see if I can help straighten that out for you or point you in the right direction. Sabrina asked a question, does achievement of high school equivalency count as an MSG regardless of their level? Yes, I understand that it does. So no matter what their level, because if you look at the table 4, no matter which level they're in, if they receive a diploma, whether that's through an adult diploma system or grade equivalency, then you can give them an MSG over here. Judy asked, may want to mention that after exit will either be found via administrative data match or supplemental data collection mention. Yes. So all the follow-up goals that are on table 5, I still call them follow-up goals, post-exit indicators. All these occur after exit, and for most states, I think, this is done via data match. So a data match with your Department of Economic Development or your Labor Department in your state, or your post-secondary system, if you're trying to match for students who have entered post-secondary. And otherwise, programs who don't have a data match system in place, you are required to do that via survey. So if you're in a state that uses the survey method, I assume that your state staff have been in touch with you about how you have to do that surveying. And if you're doing data match, then it's really important that you're collecting accurate Social Security numbers, because the more Social Security numbers you have, that's often what is being matched on. And I know some states don't allow Social Security number collection, so those might be the states that are using surveys. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. I hope you all gained something. Oh, I'm seeing some other questions in the chat area. I'll stick around for a minute or two and see if I can answer a few more questions. Otherwise, thank you for coming. I'm going to put my email here again, Jenny@Urban Planet. So if you do have any follow-up questions you think I can help with, or if I can point you in the right direction if I can't. Thanks again.
Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. So, Jenny, were you saying you were sticking around for additional time? Or
I thought I saw a couple questions come through, but now it is going pretty quick, and I don't know if I'll be able to scroll through them. So I hope people can find me online if they have any questions.
So, Jenny, what I can do is send you the copy of the questions, and you can respond back to those you weren't able to.
That would be excellent. Thank you.
Okay, great. So from all of us here at COABE, and on behalf of Jenny, myself, and Judy, who helped organize this presentation, thank you all. We truly appreciate your time, and we wish you the very best. Bye now.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jenny. Bye.